Welcome to our 98th podcast. Today we're talking about feedback. What are the best practices for soliciting and providing feedback? And what's one thing you can do to make feedback usable by deciding in advance how you'll respond to it purposefully? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants to explore and challenge workplace issues and to build better ways of working. It's a blend of theory and practice, grounded in real-world experience, working with organizations of all sizes across a wide range of industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want fresh ideas about the workplace, or just enjoy listening to consultants talk candidly about how to make work more effective and more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our 98th podcast. Ben, can you believe it?
No,
Oh,
it's
man.
fantastic.
98.
What a ride.
Yeah, right? Whew. So I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and this is Ben Kleinman, a recent CCMP, but has been doing change management since the dawn of time. Hey, Ben, how are you?
Hey, Rich. Hey, everyone. I think you just called me wicked old.
No, well, no. Oh, boy.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
yes.
I'll take that under advisement.
I'm gonna regret that one for a while.
No, that's good feedback. It's good. Since we're talking about feedback today.
Well, hey man, you've been doing change management, particularly in pharma and the medical arena for a while here. And I can't imagine that being in an environment like that, which has a lot of closed systems, and within like when I think feedback, I think system, right? Because it has inputs, it has conversion, it has outputs, and then you need to have that feedback loop to reinforce good behaviors and correct bad ones, right? Boy, I oversimplified that, didn't I?
There you go, friends.
Jeez.
MBA in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Operations 101, 201, 301, 401, and there's your degree.
That's the whole thing, right? So it boils down to that. But working in these, I don't know how much you've worked in like laboratory settings, or if you've worked in, certainly you've worked within the bigger organization, right? Feedback's got to be just critical to the success of any of those types of things, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess to step back for a minute, when you were thinking about feedback for today's conversation, were you thinking about systemic feedback in terms of that system? You have inputs, you have outputs. How do you monitor it? How do you control it? How do you keep things within certain levels of tolerance and kind of guarantee your end widget or your end services within certain quality levels? Or were you thinking more about feedback in terms of interpersonal feedback and coaching, praise, development, that sort of thing?
Yes. Oh, all of it. Literally.
All of it.
I mean that also begets quality, right? I mean, it's the quality of, so quality being just, the definition that I know of quality is that it's meeting the expectation of a customer within certain tolerances, right? So, so that could be, of course, the data that we receive from the line, trying to reach that 6 sigma of 3.4 defects per million parts, or
if that's your goal, sure.
Right, sure.
You may have very valid reasons for much lower tolerance too.
That's right. Yeah. And then, but it also is some degree of, for performance purposes, right? Within the organization, for the individual, right? They're meeting their expectations for on the management side, for the manager, and then on the employee side, that we're retaining people and having organizational commitment and having people do those
I'm going to throw out the first acronym of the day. I think I said CCMP earlier, but OCBs, organizational citizenship behaviors, like those behaviors that go beyond what the job description says, right? So, but is critical to the success of the organization. So yeah.
Nice.
So the answer is yes, Ben. That was a long-winded answer to your question.
Well, I guess maybe it's a little bit of a distinction in my mind, because there are things that you can monitor in a process that might feel less personal than if you're monitoring a person, or you're giving feedback to a specific person, or maybe even a team, where there are people and all of the things that come with interacting with people that seem very different than if you're just interacting with an abstract process or a machine or things like that. And
Sure.
Adjusting the tolerance on a machine seems very different than trying to adjust the behavior of a human.
Yeah. Well, machines arguably yet don't have feelings. And people assuredly do. We are by and large irrational organisms that have, we are driven by feelings, right? More than rational thought in many cases, right?
In many cases, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's also,
Sure.
I mean, we've talked on the show before about deep-seated neurological traits, and there are many ingrained behaviors that have just evolved over thousands and thousands of years. And so
Sure.
in today's workplace, we need ways to work with those and through those and around those.
Yep.
Where would you like to start? Or do you want to just throw it all into the mixer and do feedback fast and furious today?
Well, I mean, so I think you had the nail on the head there. Like, let's start with the human aspect of it, because I think that ties in with the article that we had published in TD Magazine, where we featured our knowledge to performance tree model, right?
Right.
And the feedback element, we kind of put this as the, what do we say, like the soil, it's the components,
The nurturing.
the nurturing, right? It's the part that feeds the foundational inputs that we started with, so it helps us to monitor and control, from a management standpoint, performance. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's start with that. But I think we would be remiss in not discussing some of the more, solid managerial types of feedback, which come from those KPIs, those key performance indicators that really govern how effective and efficient an organization operates.
Okay. Do you think it would be helpful maybe if we just took a moment and just put on the table why we do feedback, why we collect feedback, why we ask for feedback, why we provide feedback?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Like that. And it's going to maybe differ a little bit monitoring a system or a process or a machine. Like you were talking about monitoring performance indicators or metrics or the data coming off a machine, so that you can keep it within certain tolerance levels and get to if you're going for very high quality, Six Sigma type quality,
Sure.
Versus feedback for humans and people interactions and things like that, which I think tend to fall along the lines of feedback for appreciation. Hey, you did a great job. Feedback for coaching. This went well. Let's try this a different way next time. And feedback for evaluations. Should we give this person a raise or not?
Sure.
Are those oversimplifications?
No, I think that sounds exactly right.
Okay.
We've talked about, from a motivational standpoint, we have this need for esteem, which is fairly high on Maslow's, hierarchy, but there are other models of motivation, for humans that require us to have some of that psychosocial support and connectiveness in order to keep us engaged, right? Uh, how, from your
Yeah.
perspective, what have you seen
In terms of,
in terms of how the feedback on the human level, particularly in times of change, right? Because that's primarily where you've sat, right?
yeah, and you're thinking about in terms of how has feedback worked well, or how have feedback systems been set up,
Well,
or
it's so from the perspective of why feedback is important within.
okay,
Does that make sense?
from a manufacturing a medicine or a medical device perspective, the feedback for producing the drug or producing the device is absolutely critical.
Sure.
That's a very heavily regulated space, and all of the manufacturing processes are very rigid in terms of quality levels and monitoring and things like that. And that's a whole area of
That
specialties.
right.
From what I think you were asking about is more of the personal
The
side of
personal
things.
side, yeah.
Yeah, and how do people interact with each other on maybe a team level in terms of providing feedback, or a manager level providing feedback to someone that person is supervising, or maybe leadership level feedback to the organization saying, "Hey, everyone, we had a really great quarter. We need to do X, Y, or Z differently going forward, or
Sure.
let's keep up the momentum so we can hit our numbers for Wall Street," or whatever that might be. There's different layers and levels and all of that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Um, I would say that the biggest factor in how feedback is delivered, solicited, received, all of that has to do so much with the culture of the organization, and
Mm,
whether it's a culture that embraces respectful challenging and respectfully sharing what worked well or what could be done differently, versus that culture more of, I don't know, it's a little bit more of a fear culture where you're kind of doing something and you hope you don't do it wrong. And if someone's giving you feedback, you're probably getting feedback that's of the negative flavor.
mhm.
So um, people tend to fear that more.
Right.
And maybe the nuance there is that some organizations have that culture of support and psychological safety where it's okay to have hard conversations, and people have that training and safety to be in those difficult spaces if it's challenging feedback. And the other cultures tend to be not so supportive, maybe more directive and less personal, and um, yeah, they just don't have that sort of culture of safety and support
Sure.
in the same way, and so feedback is a little bit harder to um, harder to receive. I
Right.
think people are managers and leaders are very comfortable giving feedback, like, yeah, this is not working, or you did a bad job, or you have to do it differently, or whatever. Um, you're not doing it right, so fix it,
Yeah.
or
Right.
bad things will happen
Sure.
to you,
Sure.
not to
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
organization.
Right.
Um, so it seems like the biggest difference has to just be that cultural foundation. My
Yep.
turn for a really long answer.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, so from a leadership perspective, something that's very transactional versus something that's very transformative, right? That's where that transactional is coming in, and just the feedback is just to course correct. Yeah, you're doing it. You're doing it right. Keep doing that, or you're completely off base, and you're if you don't fix this, you're out, or something happens to you, right? Those negative consequences,
Right,
right? Yeah,
right.
yeah, um, and certainly, I mean, the research supports that those those organizations that use more of the kind of positive psychology, leading with strengths and trying to help people um, to grow with it from, their mistakes or from, I mean, sometimes look, mistakes can be very costly. They can be critical. They can, in some cases, particularly when we're talking about, first responders, when we're talking about food, when we're talking about drugs, any of that can be life threatening. So we do need very tight tolerances on those things, right?
Even on a manufacturing floor or in a warehouse. I mean, if
Sure.
there are forklifts going all over the place, and now some of those are robotic forklifts, you know, you have to have pretty good control and procedures there, and
Right.
have a tight eye on things, or people can get hurt.
Sure. Sure.
Very
And
important.
and so there are times where, that corrective action needs to be concise. It needs to be poignant. They need to understand the consequence that happens there. But there also is much support about taking that as a learning opportunity. And I think there's where, feedback can really change the game is, when we use it for learning opportunities, for bringing people into alignment with goals, objectives, which we get, those come from the overall strategy. I'm sorry, the strategy comes from those, right? And then again, that course correction part of
Yeah,
things, right?
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, when there's plenty of research and even anecdotal evidence out there that, particularly in times of change, where we have to keep the feedback loop open. We need to not only provide it, but we need to elicit back from other people. There is this psychological need to be heard as well.
hmm
You know,
very much so.
yeah,
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 that's a key part of any change, regardless of industry or the level of change, is helping people feel heard and helping them feel like they have some level of agency in the change,
right,
and bringing them into it and bringing them on board with it, as opposed to just pushing or dragging them through it.
sure, sure,
Yeah. You were talking about a lot of really neat things there just a minute ago, Rich, in terms of ways to give feedback and timing of feedback.
hmm
And I'm wondering if maybe we unpack those a little
yep.
bit
I love
after
that.
a break.
Let's do that. Okay, we'll be right back.
In a world where leadership needs clarity and action, and HR gets left out of the loop, one hermit crab steps in to save the day, only to be shut down by management. From the creators of Hermie the HR Hermit Crab and the Harmonious Workplaces podcast comes a new shell-shocking adventure, Out of the Loop Into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry. This book blends workplace satire with evidence-based lessons, reminding leaders that culture, trust, and people strategy don't exist as extras. They form the foundation of lasting success. Whether you work as an HR professional, a leader, or just someone who has survived a few too many staff meetings, Hermie's stories will make you laugh, think, and maybe even change the way you see your workplace. Purchase Hermie the HR Hermit Crab, Out of the Loop, Into the Fire, or HR Hung Out to Dry, now available on Amazon and Ingram Spark. Shop now at harmoniousworkplaces.com/HermieHRCrab. That's harmoniousworkplaces.com/HermieHRCrab.
Huh, big change for Fred.
And we're back. All right, Ben. So we're talking about feedback, and specifically in this segment, you teed us off with, well, why don't you, after you finish swallowing your coffee, what specifically did you want to cover in this segment here?
Well, just a minute ago, you were talking about a couple of really good things, and I think bears digging into those just a little
Sure.
bit. One is how one gives feedback, how you
Mhm.
give feedback, and something you said was very much in line with a well-received approach that often works is this idea of situation, behavior, and impact. And
Mhm.
so it's very specific and it's not personal. It's
Right.
about what happened, what was the impact or the outcome,
Mhm.
and maybe why that's good or bad, and why we want to do something differently next time. And it has nothing to do with you as a person or you as a human or your values or your moral system or anything like that. It's basically, you put your hand in the machine and it almost got chewed up and it caused a backlog and our production line shut down and now we're behind schedule.
Right.
So these are things that we can't have happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Very clear. And then also the other thing had to do with timing of feedback. And that's sort of another thing that maybe we want to unpack separately is this idea of there are times when or situations where feedback needs to be very instant. Like you're putting your hand on the stove, don't do that.
Right.
That's instant, right? You don't want your child to get burned. Whereas there's other times that feedback might not be so instant. If you're in a heated argument, you might want to take a beat, step away for a little bit, and then come back in a few hours or a few days and have a little bit more of a cooler, calmer conversation. And then there's feedback that can be done weekly, quarterly, annually if it's part of a cycle. I think I would never say only give feedback annually. That's generally not going to be super helpful.
and yet it happens. I
Oh,
mean,
that's the norm. I've
yeah,
seen.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. That's the
Exactly.
default, the norm for years and years and years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there's that.
and can you imagine before that there was probably not even annual feedback?
Mhm.
I'm
That's
thinking
true.
back to like the beginning of the manufacturing era or whatever in the 1800s, early 1900s. Can
Sure.
you imagine people getting feedback? No, they would just get beaten by the Pinkertons to work
There,
harder.
there you go. That's right. That's right.
There's your feedback.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're not going to do it's that was very, very, Les Miserables of you to bring.
One day more.
Yeah. Right on. So, wow. Yeah. You have a lot out there. Well, so I think,
I'm just trying to catch up to where you are.
well,
You laid a lot out there.
context means a lot. Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, having, like you said, sometimes that feedback is critical to have at that point. It needs to be specific, like you said. I love how you put that in there. Like it's specific. It needs to be timely. It needs to show the impact too. How'd you put that? That was specific.
Yeah, there's a model there that's SBI. It's
SBI. Okay.
situation, behavior, and
Behavior
impact.
and impact.
And some people have appended another I, so SBII, which the second I is intent.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you some feedback with the intent of helping you not have your hand chewed off
Right
when you
on.
work with this machine.
Yeah.
The
Right on.
situation was machine was running, you were, put
You
your
did
hand in the
this.
machine to get a part out, and
Sure.
that caused the machine to auto shut down and not chew up your hand. The impact of that was that our machine shut down and has a 4-hour restart process. So now
Yeah.
we're behind.
Yeah.
And you almost got your hand chewed off.
Sure. And
Something like that.
putting it into context, but I think part of that also that sometimes comes out naturally and sometimes you have to elicit it, right? Is the dialogue that comes with that, because that's, I think,
Yeah.
where that learning component happens and where the
Right.
contextualization actually sinks in.
Right.
Because without their response to it, and frankly, without somebody owning the positive or the negative aspect of that, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't get internalized. It's, oh, that's all right. I'll just brush that off. And,
Right.
there's
Right.
there's plenty of, these workplace. I have to admit, Ben, I've been watching a lot of these workplace comedies, like going back to watch some of the old Parks and Rec and some of the Superstore, and of course The Office. But
Okay.
those situations are very common in that comedic sense, right? But it really is informed by what actually happens, right? Where if we don't give the impact and then we allow them to talk about it, or even probably better, make sure that they talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
the what do they call those, the counterproductive work behaviors, CWBs, continue to
Right.
happen. Right.
Well, almost all good stories come from somewhere in reality. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
not not giving away too much, but all of our Hermes stories,
That's
Hermia
right.
HR Hermit Crab stories
Absolutely.
are grounded in some experience that one of us or many of us have had.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's all part and parcel of the kind of workplace environment.
Yep. And we like to poke a fun at
Oh
in there
yeah,
to some extent where the feedback is either not present or not to a dialogue, in a
right.
dialogue.
Or overly stereotypical in terms of boss beta just being this catastrophically horrible boss.
Yes, right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the rarity,
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully,
Well,
in real life.
we'll see how he does in book 3.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned, though, it got me thinking about this idea of very specific feedback. Here's the situation, and you mentioned it, and I think you were couching it in terms of the SMART goals
Mhm.
approach, where they're specific and measurable, and there's a time-bound focus to it.
Right.
It seems like feedback works really well when it is not personal, when it is very specific,
Mhm.
and when the timeliness of it is very much associated with the event that spurred the need for some feedback. So if it's a safety issue or something like that, the feedback is immediate. If it's a coaching moment, maybe the feedback is not immediate. It doesn't have to be immediate, but it could be delayed by a few hours or a day or something like that. But the key is that it's specific to that moment. And so in that sense, if I'm asking for feedback, let's say we just finished a visioning session or we had an on-site with a
Mhm.
client. Hey, Rich, what was your thoughts? How do you think that went? Any feedback for me? The better feedback is not going to be, oh no, you did really well. You were very chill, or
Right.
you handled that response. You responded to that question, or you handled that response very gracefully. Make it more specific in saying, you did a really nice job opening the session and making everyone feel like they were welcome to contribute and part of this effort. Or
Mhm.
you responded to that question and put the customer's fears at ease by giving them data and a nice example from another client. Something very specific, I think, makes feedback more palatable if
Mhm.
you're receiving it, but also more actionable if you're giving it. So you're not just giving feedback to sort of blab, and you
Sure.
want someone to do something with it. And
Mhm.
so the more specific and depersonalized and timely you can make it, that will tend to give better outcomes and help people hear that feedback and adjust their behaviors.
Sure. Sure. Well, you said something earlier though that I really think is it is worth uh, highlighting here, and that is because of the way that we need to deliver feedback and for it to be effectual, right? Is that there are times where you need to say, oh, I need some time, or give somebody else time to process what's happening
Hmm.
before you give it, because
Hmm.
again, when we're in that higher state of alertness, or there's some urgent matter that came up that puts us into into a state of fear or a state of anger, or something to that
Sure.
effect, right? How well are we going to be able to communicate in that state? By and large,
Or,
is go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was just going to add to that in terms of heightened personal investment. If I
Sure.
put together a slide deck or if I've crafted some sort of messaging or an infographic or something, and I put my heart and my soul into it, and I think it embodies what we're trying to say to a client. And you look at it and you go, wow, Ben, did you do that in like 5 minutes? It's stick figures? That's horrible. That's um, an instance where there may be different ways to provide that feedback.
Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So am I going to hear that well? I'm going to hear it and it's going to land, but it may not land the way you want it to.
Uh-huh.
And it probably set off all sorts of chains of swirl and unfortunate behaviors that we aren't going to be very productive.
Right. Right. And it's interesting, like,
So yeah, that timing aspect is very important.
yeah, from, I have a bit of a design background. I've worked with designers for a good portion of my career, right? And one of the things you have to learn as a designer is to understand and take critique and also maintain some level of your own integrity for what you did, right? But not, but oftentimes, like, because designers have this artistic sense of ownership of what they did, because it's literally something that they created out of nothing, right? And it takes a lot of energy and thought and all that to go back and reiterate. It can be really grating on somebody to receive negative feedback without the constructive element, and certainly even with the constructive element, if it's delivered in a way that is heavy-handed, you can have designers that'll leave in the middle of a project,
Wow.
Yeah, which is not a good place to be,
No.
Yeah.
No. It makes me think of some of the things that we've talked about on prior shows, and some of the improv techniques that we've kicked around on some of our prior shows as well, in terms of yes and, or no but, or no but no thank you, that kind of thing.
Sure.
In terms of being able to hear something and have a response to it that is not immediately personal, to where you say, oh, thank you for caring enough to give me feedback. Thank you for giving me your perspective, your opinion, your guidance, your advice, that kind of thing. And here's what I'm going to do with it. Or, no, I disagree with you, and here's why. Or,
Sure.
but these are the reasons why I had to do it this way, or whatever, that kind of thing. And so it's I think helpful in all of those is to have some sort of instant response to give you that beat, that moment, to sort of let that personal knife stab in the back moment settle, and then you can respond a little more appropriately. And
Sure.
so, some of the things I've worked well that leaders tend to do is good leaders seem to always say, thank you for giving me some feedback. And
Sure.
they seem to genuinely mean it. And then they will also either repeat back what they heard, or they'll ask for clarifying questions to make it clear that they're really trying to understand what you're giving them feedback specifically about, getting that specificity that we talked about before.
Right.
And in doing so, they sort of depersonalize it in that way. They say, okay, I did something. Tell me more about what I did, and let me repeat it back to you to make sure I've got it right, so that I don't repeat that if that's an undesirable behavior, or I do repeat that if it is a desirable behavior. And then one thing that I was doing some research for our show and I saw that I really liked is this idea of making it into an experiment. So if you said, hey, Ben, I'd like you to do something different. The way you talk on our podcasts is just to X, Y, or Z. I said, okay, Rich, let me just make sure I heard that. The way I talk on our podcasts, you're thinking maybe I need to do something differently. It's to X, Y, or Z.
Sure.
Let's try this. For the next 3 podcasts, I'm going to do A, B, and C, and let's see how it goes. And does that work better?
Sure.
So you kind of make it a little bit of a softer landing.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you're garbage, do something differently, or I'm throwing you out.
Sure.
But this thing I didn't quite like. Let's try it a little bit differently. let's see how it works. I think it's going to be a lot better. And I think you'll see it's going to be a lot better too, but let's try it.
Yeah.
And then when it's working well, we'll keep it. And if for some reason I'm wrong and it's not working well, we'll go to something else.
I love that, Ben. That feels very, like from a director's standpoint in theater, that feels like something that I've seen good directors do. Is I've not been in theater. My kids, you were a part of.
I was going to say you're warming
right
the cockles of my heart.
That's right. Yes. So
theater.
So your theatrical background's coming through here, Ben. Where I mean I've seen that where directors go, okay, this was working, this wasn't. Why don't we try this? And and that those suggestions, rather than do this, right? But those suggestions, like you said, land softer. Yeah, makes sense.
And they also, in theater particularly, they elicit more buy-in.
Yeah.
And I suspect in the workplace as well. It goes back to that co-creation and co-involvement, co-investment. Whereas if a director says, you need to stand on this spot and you need to look in this direction, you need to say this line in a very specific way, repeat after me with my exact tone, you're turning your actors into robots. Or automatons.
Yep.
And most actors they didn't get acting to do that.
Right.
And so if you can give them a way to feel what you want them to feel and respond in the way that you want them to respond, that gets that much more natural response that's going to look so much better on stage.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, Ben, we're at time for another break. When we come back, let's bring the curtain down on.
I was going to say it's time for our second intermission.
There you go, right on. Cool. We'll be right back.
Oh, hi. I'm Hermie, the HR hermit crab. So I have a quick question. Have you ever had that one employee who knows how everything works, but if you ask them to write it down, they say, "Oh, it's easy," and then don't write anything down? Yeah, me too. Try getting Hermione to share how she sets up her spreadsheets. Sheesh. Here's the thing. When knowledge stays in people's heads, performance gets wobbly. Training doesn't stick, new hires struggle, and suddenly everyone's asking, why did this used to work? That's why we talk about the knowledge to performance tree model as featured in TD Magazine from Harmonious Workplaces. Knowledge forms the roots of an organization's value. If you don't capture it before people retire, resign, or burn out, performance doesn't grow. You see, you can buy new systems, you can launch new initiatives, but without the roots, you mostly grow frustration. Anyway, I'm Hermie saying that Harmonious Workplaces is here to help you keep the good stuff from walking out the door. Make change your friend. Bye.
And we're back. All right, Ben, we have a couple of more minutes here left in our podcast. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this discussion on feedback. And I think kind of to pull this all together, maybe a recap of some of what we've talked about, but also kind of maybe a pragmatic takeaway of how we can be more using that feedback to help us to decide how we're going to respond purposely. So maybe having some plan, something. We can't plan all of it. There's a lot of improvisation. Bringing it back to theater.
Yes, and
love it. So yeah. So I mean, we've talked about that. Feedback has to be. I love the SBII model that you said there, right? So specific, behavioral, impact, right,
and intent.
Yeah. So that should we really need to do. I think maybe even explore that even further in another podcast. I think there's a lot there. I mean, I know it's not a new model, but boy, that there's just so much in that formula.
There is.
Yeah.
And maybe if we do that, I don't know if it's mixing metaphors or crossing the streams too much, but do that along with SMART goals because
Mm,
they're both getting at the same thing,
sure.
which is that you have to do something that is very specific
Specific. Yeah. Yeah.
and tied to something that is concrete and not as personal.
Sure.
It's more of a behavior focus and less a trait or personality
hmm
focus.
hmm
And I think that seems like the key to goals and feedback and anything workplace related is to take it out of the personal
hmm
and at least somewhat, you want people to show up as their authentic selves and you
Yeah.
want people to give of themselves and be motivated. And we've talked acres of time about motivation.
hmm
But you need to be also very conscious that in a workplace environment, you're focused on behaviors and getting something done so that you're servicing your clients and
Right.
your customers.
Right.
And it seems like there's a specificity and a behavioral focus that is maybe different from how you would do things in your personal life.
Sure. Sure. Makes sense. And then you had also brought up very elegantly, by the way, I love that you brought in the more being suggestive on let's try this as an experiment, so that goes a long way to, okay, here's the impact of what's happening right now. And then why don't we try this to move us ahead? That's a very persuasive way of handling this. And it also gives, I think, some degree of the psychological safety of allowing them to have some say in what happens too, right? That they feel like they have some kind of a choice, even if it may be a forced choice of some kind, right? It kind of helps to open up the dialogue,
Right.
which we discussed earlier was important too.
What's interesting too is that it allows for some of the things that we've also talked about in prior episodes where you can run small experiments or you can design things in a way that is not one and done.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks to somewhat of that, I hate to say agile, but agile or innovative or more experimental or less rigid and less fixed, more resilient maybe
Yeah.
approach
And
to receiving
like an
feedback.
iterative process, right?
An iterative process to where you might not know exactly the one single way to do something,
Sure.
but you say, let's try it and let's see how it goes. And in some cases, if it's not life or death, that can work really well. If it's, I hate to keep coming back to it, but if it's sticking your hand in a machine, you can't do
You,
that.
you
All right, so
cannot
don't do that.
yeah, you
That's the end
cannot
of the story.
iterate on that and go,
No, there's no
let's try
iteration
my
there.
other hand and see.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
that
Let's
doesn't,
try a foot or an elbow, right? No,
yeah, no.
those are out. Those are
Yes.
off the table. But if it's other things, those give a little bit more latitude
Yeah.
to experiment, then that can be a nice way to sort of have people bring themselves in and co-create what that different behavior looks like.
Right. And that co-creation, we've talked about that before too. That
Yep.
like you said, there's a lot more buy-in that you're going to get on the.
Yeah, people will be more invested in all of that. And
Yeah.
and one of the things that we've talked a bunch about in terms of psychological safety is not, and Cheryl's great about making this point, is that it's not just not having hard conversations or about sugarcoating things.
Sure.
It's setting up this environment where you can have difficult conversations and know that you still have each other's back, or you still respect the other person,
Sure.
or you know that you're having a difficult conversation in service of a greater good.
Yeah.
And it helps to defuse the personal aspect of it, I think, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
without completely butchering everything that Cheryl has taught us.
Well, she did a very good job of outlining all of that in the white paper that you can get on Harmonious Workplaces website.
Which you can download.
That's right. For free. It's all there for you.
For free. Yes.
Right on.
And people have been, we actually had someone download it just the other day. It was
Yes, that's
great.
right. Yep. For sure.
And one of the things, Rich, you had teed up in your beginning of summation here is this idea what people can do or what organizations can do to start nurturing that soil. If you think about that tree of knowledge and best behavior and knowledge transfer and all of that.
Sure. Sure.
One thing I think that people can do that's relatively easy, and it's not a one and done, so you don't have to feel like you have no future shots on goal. It's like if you don't get this right, you can change it tomorrow, or you can adjust and pivot. This idea of intentionality and thinking a little bit more about how you want your organization to be, how you might offer feedback differently, how you yourself, if you're in a position to solicit feedback, might solicit that feedback and model responding to that in a good way. And those are things that are very easy and low risk and low consequence to change.
Sure.
Or I should say, they have high benefits and low downsides.
Yeah.
So if you give me feedback and I say, "F you, Rich, that's garbage," or if I say, "Thanks, Rich, I appreciate you thinking about that. I hadn't thought about that. Let me repeat that back to you and see if I've got it right. And then let me think about how can I do this differently next time? And next time I'll try it this way, like you suggest."
Sure. Sure.
That modeling goes a long way in terms of creating that culture of safety, culture of psychological safety, but also culture of safety to respond to how feedback is solicited, received, given, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I like that. And just to some extent for that modeling aspect of it, right? That's being intentional about explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it in that way while you're modeling it can help to not only inform but also empower people to take that same type of approach so that they're not adopting some of what they've seen culturally, which could be that heavy-handed approach or of just get this done or you're out or whatever we talked about like way early on in this episode. Being more at the same time being timely, stopping the bad behaviors that are happening at that point, or those that are either counterproductive or even destructive, right? Stopping those in their tracks, but allowing people to have that buy-in and the ability to communicate their thoughts and feelings is super important. And that I think the only way that you can really get that is modeling that behavior.
Yeah. Maybe a topic for a different day, but you recently shared an experience where you essentially said culture eats standard operating procedures for lunch. And that might be an example of where you have this intent of having an organization that is great about giving feedback and receiving feedback and all of that, but where at the end of the day, people are just so heads down and stressed and trying to get one thing out the door, and there's nobody modeling that and giving them the space to experiment with that and learn how to do that they just ignore it. And all the old hands in the business just, sort of flick that idea away and they just stay doing what they do.
Sure. So we're just about here at time, Ben. We'd love to get, speaking of feedback, right? We'd love to get your feedback on how you are using feedback in your workplace. It helps us not only to create new content here on the podcast, but we like to take some of those stories and convert those into blogs, Hermie cartoons. And so of course we have Ask Hermie on the website. So if you ever want to have Hermie either discuss this in an animated video, or we could put together a comic for you or for the public, we'd love to be able to handle that for you. So we're open to your feedback for sure.
Yeah. And that'll be the professionally drawn Hermie from Rich and not the stick figure Hermie from Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love feedback.
Right on. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for this podcast. We look forward to, we're two away from number 100
That's right.
coming
That's
up.
right.
So until we meet again, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find all episodes, resources, and ways to connect with us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love your feedback. Please rate, review, share, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. And don't forget to add Harmonious Workplaces to your favorites so you're notified when new episodes are released. Again, visit us at www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.